Well then, how's everyone doing? Good? That's good, that's good. So we're here today with a friend of mine, Rox. Really cool project that I wanted to be able to elaborate on. Rox, would you want to tell the class what you've been working on and what makes it special?
Yeah, definitely. I'm Rox from GirinLabs, and I'm currently building Girin Wallet, and we're the fastest growing XRP wallet. We launched last December, and we will say we're the competitor of Zaman wallet.
Interesting, interesting. So we spoke about this earlier backstage. You were talking about the future of DeFi, especially when it comes to wallets, users, whether it could be tokenization, how they utilize tokenization through these wallets. Would you like to elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, so I think you gotta go back to how the DeFi space is in XRP right now. So, XRP has been around for a long time, and there's a lot of holders, trading volumes, but it's not being utilized that much on chain right now, right? And there's not much DeFi activities going on yet. And one of the reasons for that is there wasn't much programmability on the XRP ledger. So XRP ledger doesn't support smart contracts. So there's not some spaces or rooms to build complicated DeFi protocols on XRP ledger. But I think things are changing a lot these days. So XRP is planning on having smart contracts on the ledger. There are also EVM sidechains coming out. Axelar is trying to bridge to all those EVM chains, like ETH chain, Base chain, etc. And with that, I think there's going to be this huge DeFi market that's going to explode from then on.
That's really interesting, actually. One thing I wanted to touch on, you stated earlier about being a competitor to Zaman. I bet a lot of people here are very familiar with Zaman. It's a very popular wallet on XRP. What's some of your competitive advantages? What are some of the features you're focusing on that may not necessarily be covered in Zaman wallet or even other wallets?
I think in the end, crypto or DeFi or all these things, it shouldn't be so hard for users. You gotta abstract all the tech behind it. You gotta make it easy to use. That's the end goal for having mass adoption for these kind of services. And I would say for Girin Wallet, what we're building right now, we provide social login, and all the UI UXs are really simple, easy to use. And in the end, I think that's the best way to just onboard those users who haven't experienced on-chain DeFi or any of those stuff. And yeah, that's one of our competitive advantages, I think.
Social logins are a good one. People like to talk about how complex dealing with the 24-word seed phrases or 12-word, storing it, managing it, losing it. But no, it's just one of those things where something like a social login is almost required to allow for regular people to be able to engage in the DeFi space. But on top of that, what are some other things you guys are doing to make it easier for non-crypto, non-DeFi people to be able to access the space, especially when it comes to the XRP ledger?
So I would say we focus a lot on the UI UXs, so just make it really easy to use, just simple UIs, so you can just push one button to do a swap, to bridge your assets, to just add assets, add tokens, because adding tokens is pretty it's a complicated thing on the XRP ledger, but we make it really easy on our app to do that. So I think those are things that we're currently targeting on. And as I mentioned, we launched last December, so we just keep adding more and more features, just pushing on those sides and just making it more easier to use in the end.
No, that's real interesting. That's real interesting. When it comes to being able to cater to users, what do you think one of the biggest pain points are for users? I feel at least from my perspective as a user, you spoke about social logins. That's already a pain point just with the wallet. So social logins help. UI is also a huge component, but I feel when it comes to being able to allow users access to whether it's different instruments, whether it's new products like tokens, whether it's whatever it may be, how can you open up these markets, whether it's new types of tokens, new types of markets, what type of things can your app do to make sure that the user experience is able to be maximized?
I would say, just putting those features inside the app so that you can just access all of those inside the app really easily. Just making one-stop hub where you can just do all those activities inside. For example, just browsing the D apps inside the wallet, just utilizing XRP on the wallet via features that we're going to add on. And then in the end, just making it more like easy to connect to the other dApps out there. So we're actually like using a like wallet connect for the connection method for all these dApps out there on the XRP ledger. And that really helps us out like in just connecting our wallet to those dApps, because like in the past, a lot of the wallets out there on the XRP ecosystem had their own way of just connecting to wallets and own standards to connecting to those like applications out there. And that was kind of like a pain in the ass, because like it's not really easy for developer side to like integrate the wallet, and also from the user side, it's not really easy to like connect their wallet to those services. And Wallet Connect, it's already like used broadly in the Ethereum ecosystem, like all the ecosystem out there. It's already implemented in the XRP ledger. We've been working with Wallet Connect a lot to just push it out in the ecosystem, and that like kind of really helps on the dev side and also on the like user side, just on the user experience, I'd say.
That's interesting. That's interesting. And what type of dApps do you think, like especially the dApps that you're trying to get involved in and to underconnect users to, what type of dApps do you think are really going to enhance the user experience in terms of being able to maximize not only the XRPL, but also your application, just because in terms of the usage they're able to get from these third-party apps can also enhance the usage of your own app as well?
I'd say it's growing. Like more and more dApps are coming onto the XRP ledger, and so currently you can use those DEXs to just buy tokens as swap tokens, and I think more things will be available once the EVM sidechain comes out. I think they're going to launch their mainnet really soon, and our wallet's going to also support those sidechain bridging solutions as well.
That's an interesting.
So when that happens, like all those dApps you see on those ETH mainnets, or like other ecosystems, they'll be able to expand into the EVM sidechain or be connected to the XRP ledger, and we'll be able to foster that for the users so that they can use those applications when they come onto the XRP ecosystem.
I love that you brought up sidechains. I want you to talk a little bit on sidechain use cases, but also how you see people utilizing sidechains. We talk about being able to tokenize, we talk about what are the purposes of sidechains, and I bring this up especially because people like to talk about the hypotheticals, oh, the sidechain's coming, the sidechain's coming, but to be able to deal with a developer, someone who's actually building, someone who has a vision on what they could be done, what are some of the advantages that you think that you could offer being able to connect to a sidechain, and what are some of the things that people can do with those sidechains once connected?
So looking at a DeFi perspective, I say, what I mentioned, XRP ledger doesn't have smart contracts, and it kind of it's still getting ready for that programmability. So I think from that perspective, it's going to open up so much doors on the DeFi scheme with the sidechains. So for example, on the XRP ledger, you can only use the DEX right now, but when the sidechain opens, there's going to be upgraded DEX where you can do more complicated things like providing liquidity pools and etc. Lending markets will come out, perps, yield protocols, all those things that you see on the DeFi scheme will be opened up for XRP. And in the end, I think the broad vision that we all want to target is just make more use of XRP, just give it more utility, utilizing all those DeFi protocols out there. And that, in the end, just goes back to the value of XRP because it's being utilized more people demand it, and it's more utilities come out of it. So
yeah. One thing I really wanted to touch on was when it comes to support for the XRP ledger, people like to talk about tokenization, NFTs, collectibles, stuff like that. What are you doing to be able to cater to those markets, whether it's real world assets, whether it's NFTs, collectibles, collections? I know this is a really hot topic, especially in the XRP community, because it really comes down to what are people going to be able to do with these new type of assets that aren't explicitly XRP, or these traditional crypto, or not even traditional, but these crypto derivative assets. So how can we potentially utilize tokenization, regardless of whether it's RWA or regardless of whether it's collectible, to be able to get the most of not only XRP, but your application too? And I say this primarily because people like to really emphasize the community aspects of both, but don't really emphasize the technical aspects to be able to allow these things to facilitate. Well, how can you have a community if nobody can engage with the function or the use case of a particular token?
So I think I want to touch on the RWA side because a lot of XRP holders and a lot of people are really into that scene, and I would say one one problem we see in the RWA side is that it's not really easy for retails to touch base on it or just get involved into it because, for example, for sometimes like the T-bill yields, like if you want to get exposed to it, you need to have like certain amount of just money to get into it or just buy it or just do something with it. And so I think like from our side, we kind of want to open up the doors for those RWAs to the retails. So for example, like Open Eden, for example, on the XRP ledger. Like they have this like USDO. If we can support it in our wallet, that's going to be opening up the doors for the retails. Just easily swap it to that asset and just get the yields for the RWA and get more exposure to it. And I think these kind of like more like things adding up on the RWA side will open up like more doors and just give more things to do for the community or the users out there on the XRP ecosystem, I'd say.
Interesting. Yeah, RWAs are a really hot topic, and just being able to describe and being able to understand how you can go about working those, especially with the tools that are being provided, is an essential stepping stone to allow for this like new age of adoption. You stated a little bit before that you were a competitor to Zaman, and I really wanted to touch on this a little bit. What are the biggest things that you would have to say to an audience like this in terms of being able to, one, curate a future for the XRP ledger, but also focus on being able to allow the functionality of your app, whether it's through partnerships, whether it's through third-party applications or tokenization? What's the biggest thing that you would sort of focus on in terms of being able to maintain competition with an application like Zaman? And I bring that up because they're just the biggest ones. It's almost like saying, I'm going against MetaMask. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's one of those, it's a big one. I think you're really tapping into something huge, but I really want to know, what's some of the things that you see as an opportunity that you can take on that they may not have potentially taken on yet?
I would say, as a start, just as I mentioned, making it more easier for the users and more like adding more features that make it more easier for the users. So for example, like when you look at the Ethereum ecosystem, you see MetaMask, but it has been there for a long time. But you know, these days you see all those other wallets like Rabby, Rainbow coming out, just competing like over against MetaMask. And they mostly focus on making the user experience more easy and like simple for the users, like that MetaMask doesn't have or haven't been able to support. And we're also going on the same track as that, just listening to the community users' feedback. So from our side, we really think of like these users, our users, as like one of the like product designers of our team who can just give us feedbacks to like what kind of features we can add and what we should like more focus on, what's the pain points of the users. And from our side, because we're building on the XRP and it has a huge narrative in the like TradFi side and also on the like financial side, we're going to focus more on the like payment side, on-ramp, off-ramp, and just making like XRP utilized so that users can use XRP to just pay stuff, to buy stuff, just make more use of it. Yeah.
See, that's a really good one in terms of like how can you make people utilize the network, but also XRP in a way that's more comfortable, you know, in a way that they could utilize XRP like they would utilize Visa in a sense, or be able to utilize XRP like they would Apple Pay. And that's really cool that you're sort of like focusing on how do you sort of normalize the experience for the user on XRP as opposed to just focusing on just the user experience. It's one thing to be able to press a button and have a one-click solution. It's another thing to be able to have a one-stop solution for your ecosystem. You're able to onboard assets, you're able to offboard assets, you're able to engage with new tokenized assets, but also engage with other collections and such. One thing I sort of think that would be really interesting is where do you see the future of not just the XRP ledger, but the community on the XRP ledger? I bring this up because we see a lot in terms of like collaborations and projects working with each other, and maybe even yourself working with other projects, but where do you see collaboration in the mix of the XRP community, especially where you may sit? And I bring this up because there have been a lot of projects that may be super community focused, you know, and there may be other projects that may be more corporate focused, like Ripple or something. Where do you sort of stand in that regard, but also where do you see the future being able to navigate that going forward?
I'd say XRP, like the community, XRP community, would stay just similar path as it has been, just more on like community focused and more just focus on XRP itself, because it sometimes seems like people have this like huge faith compared to other ecosystems on the asset itself, on the ecosystem itself. And this has been continued for the last like 10 years. And I believe it's going to be just continue on. And in the end, I think that's a really, really big, like huge power that the XRP community and the ecosystem has. And we just want to make it more like just open by just like having those XRP come on chain and just like giving more utilities to it. Yeah.
Now, one thing I wanted to talk about was, do you have any like community incentives, community outreach, or token rewards? Do you have anything like that? I bring that up. I feel like I should have brought that earlier because I know that's like a really good way to start instigating activity. But I just wanted to see like what type of rewards, instigated behaviors do you have for your application that allows for the user to be able to get the most out of it?
So I would say, because from like a wallet's perspective, it's not really easy to incentivize the users like just via the wallet, I would say. Because in the end, wallet acts as like a kind of gateway to bring in the users to all of these kind of services in the ecosystem. So in the end, I think the most like important thing from our side is to partner up with more apps, just bring in more builders and applications into the ecosystem, so that those applications can we can work together with them to incentivize people to bring their assets on chain and just come on board and just experience all those like things happening on like XRP Ledger.
Interesting. One thing I also wanted to state was, did you have any plans in the future to push RWA tokens through your wallet?
Yeah, definitely.
You want to touch on that a little bit? Sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, so I think it's like an extension to what I mentioned like in my previous like comments, and we just want to, as a start, just having access or just making users able to like swap or like just add those RWA tokens into a wallet. I think that will be like a first start for them to get like exposure to RWA. And in the long-term goal, I think like the best way would be just integrating those applications or RWA dApps just right onto our app, so they can just really easily access to those like RWA products out there on the ecosystem. Just know what kind of like RWA assets are there in the ecosystem, and just give those informations to users so that they can just like choose and just like invest like whatever they want to.
I bring that up because I speak to a lot of organizations, especially around RWAs, and usually the number one issue is distribution, right? It's one thing to tokenize an asset, it's another thing to get that asset out there for people to access. And whether that's a wallet, whether that's an exchange listing, whatever it may be, it's a relatively difficult challenge, or at the very least, it's a challenge that a lot of them have to make. And it's just interesting to see like the different technologies being provided that can allow for, especially users, to interact with a lot of those technologies. We've got about a minute or so. Is there any sort of topic or sort of anything that we haven't touched on that you might want to sort of dive into a little bit?
I think like because our this panel session is mostly on the DeFi side, I just want to mention that like everything is just getting started on the XRP Ledger ecosystem, on-chain ecosystem. Ripple has been pushing a lot on just activating the XRP Ledger, starting like I would say all the like on-chain DeFi things started like last year with the AMM DEX coming out on the XRP Ledger. That kind of like started out with providing liquidity to those assets in the ecosystem, and then from there on, more and more features, more and more like assets are coming out, more builders are coming onto the ecosystem, and as I mentioned, like if more like compatibility with those other chains, or just like EVM sidechain coming out, or like etc. Like all those things coming out, it's just getting started. And once they kind of bloom, I would say the DeFi on the XRP would just flourish from there on, because there's all of these community holder base out there. There's all the liquidity out there. And if we can just bring those on chain, there's going to be this like massive market that's going to be opened up. And in the end, that will just go back to the XRP.
See, I think that's brilliant. There's so much going on in the XRP community, whether it's the community itself, whether it's the tools being built, the developers building it, people coming together and actually being able to say, hey, I have a problem and I think I may be able to solve it with this technology. Everyone being able to come together and say, hey, this is the future, is the reason why this is the future. And it's really cool to be able to have guys like Roxif here talking about his projects and talking about everything that they're doing, because as we are sort of moving through this like wave of adoption, and people sort of miss this too, it's kind of funny, where they're like, oh, when is adoption? When is adoption? Right now. Right now. You, right there.
Right
Your
now.
adoption.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Right
Seriously.
now.
Right now. No, adoption's happening right now. And the thing that sucks about it is not everyone knows about it. But once everyone knows about it, no one will be talking about it anymore because it's here. So really appreciate everyone coming out here. Really appreciate Rox being able to demonstrate his project. And I hope you guys have a good day in the rest of Vegas.
Thank you.
Discuss the expansion of RLUSD on the Omni network.
Got the mic working. Honestly, I was wondering how many people would